All right, let's stand and start with a prayer. David, will you sing the Troparion of St. George, please?
Liberator of captives, defender of the poor, healer of the infirm, champion of kings, victorious great martyr George, intercede with Christ our God, that our souls be saved.
O most holy Theotokos, intercede with thy Son and God, that an angel from heaven be sent to our children, just as to thee was sent a most mighty protector, the Archangel Gabriel, and vouchsafe us to cry to thee thus: raise our children to be earthly angels, raise our children to be heavenly men, raise our children to be thy servants, raise our children to cry out to thee, rejoice, O full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Raise our children, O Lady, to be made worthy of the kingdom of heaven, and make them heirs of eternal blessings. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right, you can be seated, and thank you all for coming this evening to what I have been referring to as a very, very important event. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to be here, because I know how busy our families are. You have, obviously, you all have kids, that's why you're here. And they keep us going, don't they? Even at my kids' young age, they keep us occupied. Juliana, I need you to go over there, please, and behave, you and Coco. Thank you. Okay. So, I want to give some introductory remarks. You know, I had some of these plans from years ago. It was a little bit of a tough transition moving in here. There were all kinds of things going on, and then COVID soon took over. And so some of these things that I'd planned on doing a long time ago, we never got around to. And so the first thing, although you have all known me, most of you, for about 4 years now, I kind of want to introduce myself within the context of youth ministry, because that's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I don't know that I've ever really shared a lot of this stuff with anyone. But I want to give you an introduction to why I'm talking about this. So first I'll start with myself. What makes me qualified to talk about this? Well, I would have to say that I'm probably not qualified to talk about this, because I think the saints are the best people to talk about this, and that's why I'm going to bring in the saints a little bit to help me out. But my background includes my bachelor's degree in human development psychology, where I focused on the youth and the development of our youth. I find that to be very important. I always felt like that was very important. And I knew that I would be doing a lot with the youth in my ministry. I was a counselor on staff at the Antiochian Village for, well, 2 summers, and my 3rd summer I went as the evening program director. The reason I bring that up is because the Village is one of the best programs we have for our children. The training that they give the counselors is phenomenal. And just having the experience of working with kids in that intense environment where we take on about 7 kids on our own for 2 weeks at a time, I think was a great experience and a great kickstart to my youth ministry. I was the spiritual advisor to the youth at a parish in the Boston area when I was doing my undergrad. I taught Sunday school very early on. And then I became a youth director at a parish full-time. The first parish that I did that at was St. Mary's in Livonia. The number of youth I had are about the same number as we have parishioners in this church. I was the youth director to about 450 kids. And it was a great program. And honestly, working that program and all the things that I was able to do, I thought to myself, wow, you're really good at that, right? Because it was easy when I had that many kids, and some other things that we'll talk about later. But then I went to some churches where the youth program that I was running myself really flopped. And it took me a long time, I'll get back to that again later, but it took me a long time to figure out what was making a successful youth program and what was making a not so successful youth program. And I'll tell you, it didn't have much to do with me. So that kind of burst my bubble a little bit. I continued to work in youth ministry for years. I was a pastoral assistant where I continued to do youth ministry in a couple of parishes. And then I seemed to be the guy that they would call to do retreats all over the country. In fact, when I was in seminary, I was planning on writing a thesis, and that thesis was supposed to be on the problems with our church school. Because I saw so many problems with church school, I'm like, the kids aren't learning, they're not coming out and knowing anything about our faith. So I started writing this thing, but I ended up getting pulled to so many different parishes to do retreats. I said, I don't have the time to even write my thesis, so I ended up taking a couple extra classes and calling it a day. So I never wrote my master's thesis. I took the extra classes instead. But actually, what's funny is a lot of what I wanted to do in seminary, I ended up doing as a pastoral assistant. Now as a priest, I'm actually continuing to do it. And now I'm continuing work and education, getting a doctorate of ministry, because it's important for me to stay fresh all the time and to bring our parish the best programs that we can possibly bring. So everything I'm about to say is from the context of what God wants, not what society wants. So I'm going to say some things that may shock you, although by now, 4 years later, you probably know me and you're probably not shocked when I say much of anything. But it's really going to be from the context of what does God want for us and for our children. At the end of this whole thing, I'm going to speak for a little bit. Nick Newman is going to speak after me for a little bit, and then we're going to have questions, comments, concerns, and whatever else. And I'd love to hear from all of you, because I still have young children. Many of you have children who are maybe my kids' age and a little older and a lot older. And so I'd like to hear from you as well. And we'll try and make this worth your time here. So the first thing I want to discuss is what is the role of the parent and what is it not. Let's start with what is the role of the parent. Okay, so in general, just in a very generic sense, who wants to share what they think the role of a parent is? Anyone?
Protect.
Protect? Very good. What else?
Provide food, shelter, and clothing.
Food, shelter, and clothing. Excellent. If we don't do those things, we get a call from Children's Services, right? What else?
Mentor.
Mentor? Very good. What else? Yes?
Teach them values.
Teach them values. Okay. Anything else?
Of course, religion.
Religion. Okay. Good. Anything else? So my list, I came up with 3 things just to simplify, and a lot of those things can fit into these categories. I said, number 1, we have to raise our children in godliness. Number 2, keep the child safe and healthy. Number 3, ensure the child's education, which is schooling and otherwise, so mentoring and values. And it's really fun at this age kind of trying to, I'm learning about how kids learn information and soak up the world. And sometimes their understanding of the world is really hilarious because they just have the funniest way of understanding it. And then we have to take that and tweak it a little bit and help them to understand the world in their own time. Because we can't sit there and lecture to them and tell, well, no, this is how the world works. We find a way to teach them. So now let's talk about what a parent is not. Who can give me something that a parent is not or should not be? There you go. Don't be shy.
Abusive.
Abusive? Okay, good. What should a parent not be?
Friend.
Manipulator.
A friend, okay, and a manipulator, okay, very good. Anything else? Okay. So my list, again, 3 things, and I like everything you said. We are not to give our children what they want. It's a big one. We don't give our children what they want. Talk about that more later. We are not to be our child's friend. I think John mentioned that. Or sibling. Look how cute we are. We look like sisters. No. And we don't need to gain our child's approval. Okay? And there's time for some of that as our child gets older, right? We can be more like friends with our children when they're kind of successful, when they're older, when we don't have to parent in the same way. We always have to parent, by the way, but not in the same way. So what is the role of a priest in our children's lives? So I would say just as like we have to raise our children in godliness, I said, we have to keep our children safe and healthy, and we have to educate our children, right? In those three things. So to help our child with his or her godliness, we have a priest. To help with their health and safety, we have doctors. To help with their education, we have teachers. Now what happens if we don't use a doctor in our assistance in raising our child? The results can be disastrous, right? Because we can't do everything ourselves, right? So just as a doctor is used to help in the health and safety of our child, right? We don't have any pediatricians here. I know we have a pediatric dentist. But the pediatricians not only take care of their health, but they usually go over things like, what kind of crib they should be in, and what kind of car seat, and all these different things to keep the child healthy and safe. Well, what happens if we try and do everything on our own? What happens if we just Google everything, right? We put our child at risk. So no one would try and take over, right? They might help lead the doctor in the path that they want to go, but no one would take over their child's health care without consulting a doctor, because that would be dangerous. But likewise, the doctor cannot take care of all of the medical needs, because how often does the doctor see the child? Once every few months, maybe at the beginning a little more often. But the doctor relies on the parents, because the doctor can't keep the child safe and healthy all the time on their own. So they rely on the parents, and it really comes down to the parents. If the parents are not doing what it takes to keep the child safe and healthy, the doctor is really useless in a lot of ways, especially if we ignore the advice of the doctor. So the majority must be done by the parents. And I want to say that the faith is no different. The faith is no different. I mentioned that there were some youth programs that I ran that were extremely successful, and some youth programs that I ran that were very unsuccessful. The secret that I found out, and it's taken me this long to find out, by the way, it kind of was confirmed in some of the work I've been doing here. A lot of it comes down to the parents. And that's why I'm spending a lot of time now, because I'm not blaming the parents. I think we have not done a good job as a church educating our parents. That's why this meeting is so very important, and there'll probably be more like it, maybe a couple times a year, just to come in and talk, and so that I can learn too from you, and you can tell me some of the concerns that you have, so that I can go back with my team and my brother priests and talk about what's the best thing we can do, because the Archdiocese has just discovered, and you're going to watch some video clips from a couple of talks from the Archdiocese, you're going to see that they're coming to the same realization that if our parents are not educated in the faith, that the children are not going to grow up properly in the faith. So we need your help, and that's why you're here. I cannot be the be-all, end-all of your child's spiritual life. It really has to be coming from you. So I want to talk a little bit about any questions so far about anything I said, and we're going to have more time for questions later. Okay. What challenges are our children facing today? The first thing I want to talk about, we might not even think is a problem, but I'll tell you it's probably the biggest problem we have, and that is secularism. Now, if you were here for the first Our Orthodox Life lecture, you probably heard me read this quote. I'm going to read it again tonight, because a lot of you weren't here. It's a quote by Father Seraphim Rose. He was a Hierom monk who died in 1982, I think. He says, "We are being pounded with a message of self-worship or relaxing, of enjoying ourselves, of giving up any thought of the other world," meaning heaven, It is actually an education in atheism. We have to fight back by knowing just what the world is trying to do to us. So secularism. It's giving up the things of the other world, of the heavenly realm, for the things of this world. And I can do a whole class just on secularism. But just to have in our mind, this is one of our main problems, is the secular world. And this is why I'm trying to bring back the church as the center of our lives. If I could have programs where we would be in church 7 days a week, you know, some of the most successful churches I've seen have that. Out in the Midwest, in the Southwest, there are some Orthodox churches that the community, I mean, they don't have Sunday school on Sunday. The kids are there, they go to liturgy the entire time, and then they go to coffee hour with their parents and the whole thing. When do they have church school? They come in the middle of the week for church school. Then they have their other activities also, but they're at church almost every single day because it's so important that this is our church family. We have to be with our family every day. One of our other challenges is egoism. We can maybe call it self-esteem. The world does not revolve around your child. One of the mistakes we make as parents is to make the world revolve around our children. This is a mistake, I think. You know, my mom used to tell me how she would take me everywhere with her when I was a kid. And the church would have a late function. She said, I'd bring you in your car seat and you just sleep there and music will be playing or talks would be going on or service would be going on and I'd be sleeping there. Yet, oftentimes I hear from people, well, I can't come, that's past my kid's bedtime. When we make everything about our kids, they start to believe that everything is about them. Now, this is different from giving up what we want and even some of our needs for our children. We should be doing that, and we need to be doing that. But to revolve the whole world around our child, I think is a little mistake. Because then they think everything's about them. I'm hungry. That means I want food this second. Okay, you need to wait a little bit before you get your food. Right? What happens if we act like that? We're not going to get along in the world. But you laugh. But do we see that? Do we see people who want what I want right now? Yes, we see that. We're seeing that more and more in schools. And we're even seeing it now with some young adults who are growing up feeling so entitled because everything's about them. So this is dangerous. We're not trying to be selfish. I'm not saying that we should be selfish as parents. Do what you want and make your kids come along. That's equally wrong, maybe even more wrong. But it's bad to make everything revolve around our kids. We're sending the wrong message from a very young age. We'll be surprised what our children are learning from before they're 1 year old. The next issue, I want you to pay very close attention to this, and it's a big issue. Sexualization. This is a huge problem. And it starts at a young age, and mostly we see the manifestations, the problems with this in adults. You're talking to a spiritual father who hears confessions for several hours a week probably. And I can trace a lot of what's going on to childhood experiences. And I'll tell you, we are probably in the most dangerous time ever for these things. If we focus as much on keeping our children pure as we did on our children's education, we'd be in much better shape. Because as difficult as it is to raise a child to be quote-unquote successful, whatever that means, right? Over-sexualization can destroy that child's life in a moment. Let that sink in. And I bet you Mike Knapp, who's a detective, probably agrees with everything I'm saying right now. Because he sees the very ugliest parts of this. And part of my opinion on this is when I worked or volunteered as a police chaplain. And I saw some of the same kinds of things that he saw. There are a lot of things that are contributing to our children's over-sexualization. One, music. Think about the music when you were kids, right? Some of you are around my age, maybe a little older. I won't say much older. But we know what our music was like, and were there sexual references in them? Yeah, sure. But what is music like now? You literally have music where you have the sounds of the bedroom being played in a song. They're appalling. And this is what our children are listening to. This is what they're dancing to. How do you dance to music like that? How do you dance? You know, most of you know I was a mobile DJ for a long time. I put myself through seminary, or my undergrad of seminary, DJing, because it was an expensive private school, right? And there came a prom, and I used to think proms were fun to DJ. There came a prom where the students all gathered and made a huge circle in order, this was premeditated, to block the teachers from getting onto the dance floor and stopping, where a couple went to the center of the dance floor and became a man and a woman on the dance floor. That same night, I played a slow song, which I thought everyone loves slow songs. That was a chance that you got to have your date and you hug her. They started booing me. I'm like, what on earth is going on? And somebody said, don't play that, we just want to grind. I called my boss after that. I said, I'm not doing school dances anymore. I'll do bar mitzvahs, I'll do weddings, I'll do whatever you want. I'm done with school dances. I'm just not doing it. And that was the last prom I ever did, thank God. I wish I never saw the things I did there. Maybe God allowed me to do that so that I can let you know what's going on in our schools. Maybe not that exact thing, but things that are very similar to that. You know, there is a unwritten rule in the Catholic school here that girls should lose their purity by a certain grade. I'm not saying everyone does it, but there's a pressure for that, even in a Catholic school. I know the Catholic school in the town that I grew up in, we knew that those kids were sometimes more wild than the public school kids, right? So I'm not knocking the Catholic school because this happens everywhere, but don't think just because we pay more for our children's education that they're safe, or that we're sending them to a religious school that they're safe. Another place that our children are becoming over-sexualized, TV and movies. Watch what your kids are watching. There are no ugly actors on these werewolf TV series, right? Why do you think the boys' shirts are off half the time? Because, don't laugh. Because it's all about stimulating our young girls. The music videos that our boys are watching, I know MTV doesn't do that anymore. They have other things that are more disgusting now. But if you watch the music videos, I mean, these things are really horrible. I don't think I've seen a music video in years, and I don't want to, because the stuff that's going on there, I mean, that would have been considered probably rated X back when I was a kid. Now it's just everywhere. Commercials on daytime TV, right? I was watching, I don't know what, it wasn't supposed to be a bad show, and I get a commercial where the very first line, it looked like I Dream of Jeannie's bottle that this lady was in. She says, "Welcome to my vagina." And I'm like, hello, my kids are sitting here. What is going on? So watch what our kids are watching on TV. And nothing's innocent, by the way. Disney is now pushing an agenda. Disney Channel. If you think your kids are safe because they're watching Disney Plus, think again. Clothes are another big thing. What are our kids wearing? And this isn't just for the girls, by the way. I know there is a culture, our society is saying, you know, it doesn't matter what the girls are wearing. The boys need to learn how to control themselves. That's what our society is saying. And there's certain truth to that. Yes, we do need to teach our boys to control themselves. And I've often told parents, and I told my wife, we haven't had any boys yet, maybe one day, but I always told my wife, and I tell other people, the rules for boys and girls have to be the same. We can't tell the boys they can do one thing and tell the girls they can't do the same thing. We have to be fair down the line. Now, boys and girls are different, right? But we have to treat them fairly. We have to be fair. Boys cannot go around sleeping around, and our girls can't. That makes no sense to me. But the clothes we wear, what are we telling people with what we're wearing? I'm not saying look like a slob every day, right? It's important to look good, to be clean, to look, like we care about our appearance. But what are we telling people when we're dressing a certain way? I see the first day of school, back to school pictures with girls wearing shirts up to here. What is that telling the boys? Right? And then it's annoying. Everyone's looking at me. And you know what I tell our young girls? You may like the attention that some of the boys are giving you, but you know who else is seeing that? The people that you don't want attention from. This is a big deal. We have to be careful. And the boys taking pictures, selfies of themselves, flexing, and with their shirts off and their six-pack, that's also just as bad. We have to be careful, and I'm not going to get into the other pictures that they're sending each other. You know about that. Which leads me to my next point. The other thing that is over-sexualizing our children, their phones and their computers. Parents, watch over your kids. Don't trust your kids. Do not trust your kids. I remember in Oklahoma City, there were a group of really good kids down there. And I would take them, they always won the Bible Bowl for the diocese, and I'd take them to the national convention. And there were two of the kids that were dating. And they said, I was a subdeacon at the time, they said, "Subdeacon, we want to go just spend a little time together, if that's okay." I said, "No, you can't do that." And they said, "Why not? Don't you trust us?" And I said, "No." And they were shocked, and they were like, "Really? You know us." I said, "If you knew yourself, you wouldn't trust yourself." And I tell our kids this, don't trust yourselves. Because you put yourselves in bad situations. I've never had a teen who started out in a relationship who said, "Well, I'm going into this relationship so that I can have a physical relationship with this other person." They always tell me, "No, I know what I'm doing. I'm saving myself for marriage, blah, blah, blah." You know how it always ends up? Not good. So I tell them, don't trust yourselves. We ask in the Lord's Prayer, "Lead us not into temptation." So why would we put ourselves in temptation's way? Interesting point. One of my psych professors, he's not Orthodox, he was a Unitarian actually, a very smart man. He said that the divorce rate in this country skyrocketed with the invention of the automobile. Anyone think why? Didn't make sense to me when I first heard him say it. Because instead of courting, right? So that's when the divorce rate started going up. Why? Because the divorce rate started going up with sexualization before marriage. Big problem. Not saying that's the only cause, but there's certainly a lot that can go into that. With their phones, they have the whole world accessible in the palm of their hand. Not to mention the people they are talking to. And it's not always the creepy strangers in another state. It's sometimes their own friends. I talked to a girl not too long ago who was, I think, 12 or 13. No, 14. She was just going into high school, and she was very unhappy about it. And I said, by the way, not somebody from our church, someone else. I was sitting with her grandmother. And she said, "I'm really nervous about school." And I said, "Well, why?" She said, "My friends used to always send me," she said the boys in my school would always send me messages that I should end my life. And all kinds of other things. And you know what? A lot of these girls don't tell anybody. They don't tell an adult, they keep it in themselves. It's so dangerous. When I was in New York, one of my teens called me in the middle of the day once and said, "Father, before you get mad, I'm not in this." I said, "Not in what?" They said, "The boys of the school collected all the nudes that the girls send them over the year and they put them up on a website. She said, do you want me to send you the website? I said, no. But I called the school immediately because now you're getting into federal law. This is child pornography. I called the school immediately and I told the principal, you need to do something about this now. And they did. And they got to the bottom of it and took the website down. But this is very dangerous stuff, guys. It's very, very dangerous. Another thing we have to be careful of is demonic influence. Number one, the devil works through people. Our friends, our children's friends. Number one rule, I told my wife before we even got married, I said this will be a deal breaker if you're not on board. If God blesses us with children, no sleepovers. No sleepovers. You're probably all looking at me like, because I get this a lot, the priest has gone mad. He's way too strict. He's crazy. I can't tell you, as a priest, how many times I've heard of things happening at sleepovers. Things that would make your hair fall out. Sleepovers are a bad idea. You know, I remember one of my teens in my last church, when I was telling them that you shouldn't have sleepovers, said, the best conversations happen after midnight. And I said, the worst conversations happen after midnight. And conversations are only the beginning. Having a lot of Orthodox friends and being in an Orthodox environment is a very good place to start. But remember, nobody, pay very close attention to this, nobody knows anybody, period. You don't know anybody. If you think you know somebody, you don't. What goes on in somebody's own mind, in their own life, the closest person to them doesn't know what's going on in their heart. Nobody knows anybody. Guard your children with your life. This is so important. Our culture is full of demonic influence. The normalization of sin, right? Things that for 2,000 years we've known to be sinful in the Christian church is now being promoted as this is healthy, this is good, there's nothing wrong with it, your Christian faith is wrong, they're fundamentalists, Christians are bigots, they hate. Don't let the world normalize sin for your child. We have to protect our children. Remember, the first thing I listed in what a parent does is that raise their child in godliness. That's your first job, above anything else. By the way, our children are not our own. We rent them. We pay for them. They're God's children. We are taking care of our children on behalf of God. And this is why the state can even remove children from their parents if they feel like the parents are dangerous to their children. Now sometimes this goes too far. In places like Canada, there's a father who wouldn't let his young, I think, daughter transition, and he had his daughter taken away. But we don't have to deal with that yet. If you think we're not going to have to deal with that at some point, you're probably mistaken. So be on the lookout. That's why what's going on in our culture is very important. We need to be on top of this stuff. Finally, we need to be aware of older people who want to spend too much time with our children. Avoid having your children spend too much time with people who are older than them. That means sometimes people who are a year or two older, right? When my oldest gets a little older and she has her friends over, it's probably not a great idea for my younger daughters to spend a lot of time with them because they're at a different part of their development. They're going to be talking about things that they don't need to hear, that they probably shouldn't be talking about in the first place, but we can't keep our kids completely in a bubble, right? But adults, someone wants to spend too much time with your kids one-on-one, that's probably problematic, right? Like I said, no one knows anyone, period. Another issue, drugs. When you think that my kid will never do that, think again. There are always new ways to do drugs, and they're everywhere. I was in New York visiting my family last year, and I saw that you had to have ID to buy whipped cream. I'm like, what on earth? And I asked my brother, because he lives there, I'm like, what is this? And he said the kids are huffing the gases, I guess, that make the stuff come out of the aerosol cans. And they were getting high like that. And some of them having brain damage and dying. There's so many drugs out there. Some of them are prescription drugs. That's one of our biggest problems right now, by the way. Prescription drugs. Somebody takes some of their grandma's drugs, sells them at school. This is just to help you stay up and study. Or this is just to take the edge off. Or you're anxious. I'll give you something. The kids start to become doctors and prescribe drugs. Weed is a big problem. And I don't need to tell you about the drug pandemic in Charleston. You all have lived here, most of you longer than I have. You know what's going on. Do not ever think that your children are immune to that. Please. So, how can we give our children the best chance at a life in Christ? Now that I've gotten all the depressing stuff over with. Sorry about that. But it needs to really be brought up. We need to talk about these things. If you pull out the cards that Juliana handed you, from St. Porphyrios, he has tips on bringing up children. Number 1, pray for your children during pregnancy. A lot of us are past that stage, maybe not all of us. But during pregnancy, pray for your child. If you don't think that helps, then you don't understand the power of God. Now, if you've missed that and you're like, shoot, I missed a good opportunity, guess what? We can still pray for our children. Number 2, he says, stop giving them advice unceasingly. Rather, talk to them through prayer. Part of that is having them involved in prayer themselves, but praying for them. You know what prayer does? Prayer is asking God to do what we cannot do. Prayer is asking God to do what we cannot do. When your child is just impossible, they're not listening, right? How many have teenagers or preteens? Or even a 6-year-old going on 16? Pray for your children. Actually, the first prayer I did after the Troparion comes from an akathist for children. Some of our parishioners have prayed that at my suggestion, and they said, it's such a beautiful service. So look it up, it's online. Do an akathist for your children, for the upbringing of children. Number 3, be an example for your children. One of the things that I hate in youth ministry, since I was doing youth work, is when people say, we are doing this for our children. To me, that comes off as so fake. We're having this program for our children. When I was the spiritual advisor for the church in Massachusetts, I remember on Holy Friday we had an all-night vigil, and at one point I was looking for all the chaperones. They all kind of disappeared, and I needed them for something. So I went to look for them, and I saw them all in the hall, just like this, and they were eating Chinese food. They were eating chicken and pork and God knows what. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's Holy Friday, and they started laughing at me. They said, that's cute. We used to fast when we were kids. And that's a problem. Somebody told them that all the stuff was for kids, that we were doing it for the kids. So it was like a show we were putting on for them, right? This is something that you do, and when you get older, you don't have to do it anymore. No, be the example for the kids. How do your kids know what being a Christian is if you're not being that example? Number 4, teach your children to ask for God's help in every situation, right? Your kid is scared at night in their room by themselves. What do? You teach them to pray. You pray with them. You don't just throw them back in the room and say, go pray. They don't know how to pray unless you teach them. They have a test coming up. Even if it's in kindergarten, tell them to pray before their test. Teach them to make the sign of the cross before they eat and say a prayer. My kids know to pray before we eat. The other day, I was getting food ready for everyone, like at a different time. You know, set this down, set that down. And I said, Cassini, why aren't you eating? She said, Baba, we didn't say prayer yet. at 3 years old, right? When children make mistakes, talk to them seriously and firmly, but not with anger. By the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with spanking. You may have your own opinion on that, but we should never spank out of anger. We should never strike our children out of anger. And we should probably stop at a certain age, because that is probably just getting our frustrations out. And then they can understand words, right? And consequences better anyway. But everything we do, even when we talk to them, it shouldn't be out of anger. If we need to put them in a timeout for a couple minutes for us to put our composure back together, then do that. But then come prayerfully and firmly, right? We don't have to be nice in the sense that we're just letting them off the hook whenever they do something wrong. It's our job to correct them. We have to speak to them firmly. Number 6, do not overprotect them, but teach them how to take care of themselves. If we're teaching our kid, doing everything for our kids, and we're not really teaching them, we're doing them a huge disservice. And I think more and more we are doing that as parents. You heard the term helicopter parenting? I've never seen that more than I'm seeing it right now. Horrible. Let your kids, if your kids have an issue, let them talk for themselves. Teach them. When they come and complain about this or that or the other person, don't go deal with the problem for them. Teach them how to do it. Teach them how to be men and women. Right? They're not always going to come to us, and we're not always going to be around. Guess what? There's a good chance, and I hope this is the case, that we're going to die before our children. Do any of us want our children to die before us? I don't think so. So that means we have to prepare them to live without us. I know that's hard to hear, especially when they're this age. But if we're doing everything for them, we're not helping them out. Teach them to be independent. Number 7, this goes with that, raise them in freedom. You know, God gave us free will. Now there are limits to the will, to this free will with children, because we just can't let them do whatever they want. Right? If Amelia wants to touch the stove while it's hot, it's my job and her mother's job to keep her safe from that. If my kids want to do drugs, it's not my job to say, well, here, do them at home. At least I know you'll be safe. By the way, one of the stupidest things I've ever heard from parents. I'll have them do it at home because at least I know that they're doing. You know what the kids take from that? I can do it as long as I'm responsible. That's what they get from that. Horrible idea. And then we're teaching our kids to break the law. What's the law say? You don't drink before you're 21. What am I saying? It's okay to do it. It's okay if I break the law for you. As long as you're home, you can drink. Horrible idea. So we raise them in freedom. We let them make some mistakes, but we put boundaries so that they don't get hurt. Finally, be holy so that your children may be holy. This is huge, guys. This is our calling. And this is where I think we have failed, maybe as an archdiocese, maybe me only as a priest. But that's why we're having this program, because I need to focus on the parents now. I need to tell the parents, this is how we make our children holy, is by making yourselves holy. I said this years ago during a sermon, and it stays true. Only 33% of children will grow up going to church and continue going to church if their mother went to church but their father did not. 66% of children will go to church if only the father goes but the mother doesn't. The father has a huge role in the spiritual direction of their children. And I see that, I look at families, including my own, by the way. My dad is an atheist who never went to church. And of 3 children, I'm the only one that goes to church. Maybe I make up for the rest of them, but all kidding aside, that statistic, I see it all the time. It's scary. So we need to model Christian behavior. And one of the ways that we do that is we sacrifice things for God. You all have sacrificed something to be here tonight, and I commend you and I thank you for doing that for your children, because you saw that this is important. I don't know, maybe I put a little fear in you, talking about how important this was. But whatever it was, here you are. Here you are. And I appreciate that. But now we have to take this to the next level. When we're putting on programs, now granted, we might put on a program that I think is cool and I've seen it work in other places, and your children just might not be interested, and you need to come communicate with me and tell me, Father, our children just aren't interested in this. Maybe something else, right? And then we can bounce some ideas back and forth off each other. Maybe my idea encourages your bad idea, which is back and forth encourages a good idea eventually, right? And then we get something good that the kids want, or at least willing to do. But you know what? Your kids don't have to want to do everything. Sometimes we tell our kids what they're going to do, right? Do our kids have a choice when they're sick and we give them medicine? No, they take the medicine. Do they have a choice when they don't want to go to school? No, you're going to school. Do you have a choice that you don't want to go to church? No, you're going to church. Because that's what's best for you. So I've spoken enough. I want to introduce Nick real quick. One of the reasons that I knew that Nick would be a great addition to our community is his specialty in working with our youth. Nick has a PhD and was a headmaster of a school right before coming here. He has 3 children of his own and develops curriculums and teaches, and he's actually continuing to teach at a private school even while working with us here, just to keep up that that skill of working with the youth. We're very blessed to have him working with us, and I've asked him to help me with this presentation tonight. So at this time, Nick is going to speak to you for a little bit, and then I'm going to just give a couple final remarks, and then we're going to hear from you. So Nick, if you would please come up.
Don't pull up yet.
So just swipe over and that should work when you're ready to play it.
So I thought rather than spending a lot of time talking myself, I would show you a little video from a recent clergy symposium in which the priest, Father Belcher, who is in charge of the Archdiocesan Youth Commission, is talking about a very important program and why this program is so effectual. Because where are our children the happiest? Very often it's when they're at camp, right? And I know many of your own children have had this experience at Antiochian Village. I grew up in the Boston metropolis, New England, and I spent many years going to camp there and as a camp counselor, and I saw the same thing Father Belcher is going to be talking about. And that is that children are at home when they're at camp. They find themselves to be freest when they're at camp. They find themselves to be involved in the faith in a way that sometimes they don't feel when they're back in their own parishes. So let's listen to Father Belcher. And
number one thing, for those of you who heard confessions at camp, the number one thing a kid says at the beginning of that confession, if it was the Family Feud, and they said, the number one thing kids say in confession at camp, ding, it'll be this: Father, I came to confession last summer. I thought I was going to try harder to be a good Christian. I was so fired up in my faith when I left camp. 2 weeks later, it was gone. Haven't been to confession since. I quit praying. Now I'm here again, and I feel like I want to come back to God. So we're at confession again. Let's go. That's it. Am I right, brothers? We fire them up, and then they fall off. Why are they falling off? Another book I highly recommend for the mindset we've been working with, Archbishop Averki Toshev of Jordanville, Struggle for Virtue. Asceticism in a Modern Secular Society. Awesome, awesome book. But this quote says it all. The frenzied, neurotic tempo of modern life makes it difficult to find calm and peace for tired, worn-out souls, merely some kind of pitiful, weak-willed cogs in the gigantic mechanism of modern life, which has lost the spirit of Christian freedom. They themselves have become soulless flesh, enslaved by sin, all kinds of pleasures. Truly, the modern world has become nothing other than a giant sieve through which Satan in triumphant victory sifts us as unfortunate ones like wheat. And he did this at a series of talks in 1948. And he said this amazing thing where he said, modern entertainment is like cocaine. It addicts us and kills the spirit. And he had no idea about Facebook. He had no idea about TikTok. No idea about YouTube, Netflix streaming services. He didn't know that even existed. But he knew what it was. And he talks about the distinction that some fathers have, not all of them speak about it the same way, but the mind, the body, body, soul, spirit distinction. And he said, the soul is the thing that kind of drives wanting experiences. It drives wanting to do the new thing. It drives kind of laziness, not hard work, pleasure, not pain. And the spirit is the part of us that differentiates us from the animals. And it brings us to knowledge of God. But that part goes to sleep when the soul's driving the bus. When we send our kids back home to these, back home to Netflix, back home to normal life, that spirit that wakens in camp goes back to sleep when they go home. And one of the things that I know for me and Father Michael as session priests, we hit that really hard this summer. Don't just let the spirit go back to sleep. Why do you love it here? And this is a sermon both he and I give every summer. Why do you love this place? You tell me you're more free here. You tell me you're more joyful here. You tell me, you guys have worked at camps, I'm my best version of me here. Why? We take them out of that. We're taking them out of that. We're putting them there in a spirit-filled, grace-filled environment. And it's actually one where they have no choices. I'll make fun of the kids. I'm about to do it tomorrow. What do you love about this place? You tell me you love it. And I'll ask them, hey, how many of you have gone home excited and try to tell your friends about what you did here? How many have a hard time explaining it to them? They look at you like you're crazy, right? Why? I was like, you guys want freedom? Where's your freedom here? You say you're free? We tell you what time to wake up. We tell you to clean your cabin. We tell you to go to breakfast. No choices of what you eat. You go to church for an hour with no pews. You're singing Byzantine chant the whole time, right? 3 hours of Christian ed after that. Then you play games. You can go to a lot of places with games, but you have fun with 2 plastic poles shoved in the ground, trying to knock the other ball off the other guy's pole. You go back to Vespers, right? If you didn't clean good enough in the morning, guess what? You clean more in the afternoon, right? Then you have games like Carnival Night where they're playing games with piles of flour and playing cards, or I don't even know what that one is, but we tell you what to do every second of the day. And you tell me you feel free? We're telling you what to do all the time. They're like, oh, what do you know about that? So, I'm going to give you a couple of things to consider, and I'll wrap up.